So it's July 1864, and you and I are Union soldiers who have been captured, and we are now prisoners of war with the Confederate Army. We're loaded on the trains, and we're sent to a little small town in Georgia, to a prison camp, where we are unloaded right here in this very location, and then marched right down the street behind me to a place known as Camp Sumter, otherwise known as Andersonville. So this is a sight we will see when we get off of the train line that runs right here, and this is the exact position of where this train line ran in 1864. We're unloaded and we're met with the site right here that you see now in Andersonville, Georgia. As you can tell, now in 2024, 160 years later, almost to the exact date, well, we are looking at a little bit of a different site, but a lot closer to what it looked like than you may actually think. Of course, now the roads are paved, new buildings are put up, but this road was here then, and it's still here now. So this camp, or Camp Sumter, as we know now, of Andersonville, where we are being sent, is ran by a captain by the name of Henry Wirtz. Now, Wirtz is going to have his office right here behind me. And let's take a look at some of the things you can find here in Andersonville now and talk about this captain for just a moment. So this monument, which you can tell has a big crack in it, is a memory monument to Captain Henry Wirtz. He was born in Zurich, Switzerland in 1822. Now, he is going to be sentenced to death and executed in Washington, D.C. on November the 10th, 1865. And the reason why is, well, for some reasons you'll see once we get to the camp. And there is a quote here on his monument from President Jefferson Davis, and then on the reverse side of the monument, it is hard on our men held in southern prisons not to exchange them, but it is humanity to those left in the ranks to fight our battles at this particular time to release all rebel prisoners north, would ensure Sherman's defeat and would compromise our safety here. U.S. Grant, 1864. So Captain Henry Wirtz was the commandant here in Andersonville. And the reason why he's going to be sentenced to death is for the atrocities that you're going to find out about in this episode. But in 1864, the Union Army was not exchanging prisoners because President Abraham Lincoln didn't like the way that Union prisoners were being treated. He didn't like the way that Union African American prisoners were being treated, and he wanted them treated fairly. So he was going to stop exchanging Confederate prisoners until that was done so. And it really didn't stop. And that is the reason why we have this quote on the back of this monument from Ulysses S. Grant in 1864. Now, right here is the Captain Henry Wirtz office site. Now, I'm not for sure if this is the original building. I can't answer that. It is for sale, as you see. So if you want to buy it, well, you could buy it for yourself. So there you go, Carl Adams. That's who you need to call. But there's a good shout out. But you can own this piece of history here, and this is where Captain Wirtz is going to have his office site, and it's just going to be feet, or yards rather, from the railroad depot where all of these Union prisoners are going to come into Andersonville. So if you're ever in Andersonville and you visit the site of Andersonville, you really need to come here first to kind of get your stepping off point of like what you and I are going to experience in 1864 if we were some of these Union soldiers stepping off of this train depot, going into an uncertain future. For many of these 45,000 prisoners who's going to come through the prison camp here in Andersonville, Georgia, it's going to be their last for around 13,000 men. So this is going to be one of your most notorious spots of a prison in the American Civil War. So yeah, come by and check it out for yourself. Now let's see, if we were Union soldiers in 1864, where our next stop would be. All right guys, so if you come here to Andersonville, you've got to check out the National Prisoners of War Museum here. And this is the first place you probably want to come before you actually hit the fields here of Andersonville. And there's always members of the National Park Service here that will come and help you find your way, answer any questions, and of course show you through this awesome museum here. So guys, come on, thank your National Park Service employees here for being able to make these sites available and accessible to you. So without further ado, we're going to go into Andersonville right now. I didn't show you the museum on purpose because I want you to come and see something here for yourself. If I show you everything, well, you may not make the trip. But you and I were still soldiers in 1864, and let's go explore what our life is going to be like 160 years, almost to the day. So let's go and see how we're going to live, work, or maybe not work, but just survive here in Andersonville, and maybe even not survive Andersonville. So let's go. Okay, so we have got off the train in Andersonville, Georgia at the depot, and we are brought right here to this field you see behind me, now paved with concrete paths. And in this area is going to await stockade walls that resemble something like what you see over my shoulder right back here. And this stockade is going to house us for the next several months unless we die first. So the field that you see now in 1864 as we arrive here is met with a sight of a structure that looks something like this. This is the outer walls of, or the inner to outer wall of Andersonville Prison. This is where we are going to come in, and we are going to get our first taste of life as a prisoner of war. Now here in Georgia, where we had just come, it is hot. It is the middle of July right now, and July of 1864, the same as that time 160 years ago, this was no different. It was hot here. There are little trees because they've been cut down to make a spot for this prison camp. And the men here, well, they're at its heyday, Andersonville saw 45,000 prisoners come and go. At any given time, there would be 33 to 35,000 prisoners here in this little 26-acre spot. And life is going to be terrible. They said that you could smell the stench of Andersonville from 16 miles away in Americus, Georgia, if I'm saying the name of the town right. Now, as a Union soldier, you come here, you and I, with nothing but the clothes on our backs. That's it. The clothes on our backs, which is very little. And over time, those clothes are going to rot off of our bodies as we endure this hot summer sun here in Andersonville, Georgia. At the time, it was Camp Sumter. So here at Camp Sumter, we're going to take our life and we are going to live it the best we can and survive this ordeal. And if you look right here, this is some of the places we may live in. This is called shebangs. It is little tents made out of whatever we could find laying around. It could be a shelter half. We may be lucky enough to get our hands on a canvas shelter half. Or it could be that we could only find a piece of a tarp, or a jacket even, or even a pair of trousers would sometimes serve as what will protect us from the elements and give us shade and comfort for the next coming months. Now, as we stand in this place, you really get a sense of what the Union soldiers endured. Except, well, there were 33 to 35,000 men all the way across this field, 26 acres. That's not a big spot at all. So this camp was extended after some time because they found out it was too small. So they extended it 10 acres. Later in 1864, and now we have this 26-acre plot of land to house the 6th largest city of the Confederacy. That's right. 33 to 35,000 people would make Andersonville or Camp Sumter the largest, 6th largest Confederate city. That's crazy. Crazy. So if you come here to Andersonville and you put yourself in the shoes of these men like we're trying to do today, and we think about these shelters, this is all we have. This is it. Now, a lot of you may be wondering, or saying to yourself, oh, we've got a fence here. You know, this is to help us, you know, have something to lean against or whatever. But if I was to touch this fence like I'm doing right now, well, I'm a dead man. Because at the top, guarding this fortification or camp or whatever you want to call it, all the way around it are these pigeon roosts. These little structures peeking out above the walls here. And this is called the dead man's line. If I touch this, even lay a finger on this wood or go across it, I'm a dead man. And several soldiers would meet that fate. In particular, thanks to Project Past and his episode here from Andersonville, I learned that one Union soldier met exactly that fate whenever he accidentally fell and his head landed just over the dead line. Because his hand landed on that dead line, a soldier, guard from one of these pigeon roosts here, shot him and killed him. 13,000 men would meet similar fates here of starvation, being killed because they accidentally crossed the deadline or in another fashion. So yeah, this is definitely a solemn place and reminder of what man could do to one another. So as we walk the fields here of Andersonville or Camp Sumter, it's very hot today. As you can see, I got sweat dripping down my face. We've got ants to contend with. We've got, well, snakes. I mean, everything imaginable is here that we're having to contend with as a prisoner of war in this little 26-acre spot of land. But what did we do for water? Well, let's talk about that. So water here at Andersonville was pretty scarce. The whole reason why this place was put up here was because down in that hillside, which we'll see that in a few moments, there's a stream running through there to supply us with drinking water. And we'll talk about that stream in a moment. But we will also want to dig wells. That stream is a long way away. And there's some reasons why we don't want to drink out of it. So what they will do is they would try to attempt to dig wells. And if you'll look, there's one here, another there, another there, another right over there, and then another to our front here. And the reason why is because these men were desperate to find drinking water. There's 33,000 men in this little cramped space of Andersonville. We've got to have water. We've got to drink. We've got to survive here. So, well, This is how we would try to get our drinking water, is by digging wells. And let's move to our next spot here in Camp Sumter / Andersonville and talk a little bit more in depth about what we're looking at and what we would have experienced here in 1864. Now, before we get out of here, I just want to note, and you probably can't see this on camera, but just to our front, right in front of that paved road in the distance, are white stakes. That is outlining the walls of this Camp Sumter or Andersonville camp. That's not very big. 33 to 35,000 men cramped in this little tidy space, standing in this exact position, will give you that feeling of what it must have felt like to be here. So as we're driving through Andersonville, because it is ungodly hot today, of course we're in 1864, we're soldiers of the Union Army. We don't have horses, and we most certainly don't have cars, but we're using our imagination here, okay? But as you come in today, you will notice all of these monuments. There's one to the Wisconsin men, erected by the state of Wisconsin, to the Wisconsin soldiers who were in Andersonville or Camp Sumter prison here in 1864 and to 1865. I can't talk. But you have other monuments out here as well. They're not the only ones. You're going to have Rhode Island. You're going to have several others here. There were some Michigan men here inside of the fortification as well. And then you have these white posts that we just talked about on the previous spot here at this site. Now, the first white post you see closest to the camera here is going to be the outer wall of Andersonville. We'll put up a schematic here so you can kind of see what Andersonville looked like at the time in 1864. There was an outer wall, then there was a little sally port between the outer wall and inner wall. That was so that the Confederate guards could make their way around the fort, the pigeon roost, the guard towers, if you will, and they will be able to not have any contact with the Union soldiers who, well, they probably didn't want to have good things to say or do to them. And then you see another white post back there, and on it you will see deadline. What is a deadline? Well, that deadline, like we talked about just a few moments ago, is the line. If you even cross that, put a finger across it, you will be shot where you stand. And there's, like we saw on Project Past video, if you haven't seen it, go back and do it, where he filmed here. He talks about one soldier, one Union soldier, who's going to come to that deadline, accidentally trip and fall. His head is just going to brush it. They're going to shoot him and kill him. So a little accident will get you killed. And 13,000 men here will meet that fate out of the 45,000 that ended up coming through Andersonville. And you'll see these little white, these little gate things here, as you can look between the white statues here. This little gate thing directly in front of the camera is going to probably be sites of wells. There were several hundreds of wells that were attempted to be dug here in Andersonville by the soldiers to get a source of fresh water, which we'll talk about why they were doing that in just a few moments. But there were several of these well sites here. They're either marked by this or little stone markers you'll see scattered throughout the site of Andersonville. And then as you continue along, here's other monuments. Michigan monument, as we mentioned, is in the back. Massachusetts right here. And then the big one is Ohio. So several monuments to Union soldiers who were here from those states, now scattered the fields of Andersonville. So we are right here, just down from the main gate, and you'll see this is called the Stockade Branch, otherwise known in parts as the Sink. Not Stink, S-T-I-N-K, but Sink, S-I-N-K. And yeah, I've made that mistake several times. But the Sink, if we walk across this little field, is going to be the source of legend here in Andersonville. And I can tell you now, by walking right here now, it is a little squishy up under the boots. So you can see why this is called the Sink. And this was just a no man's land. This was completely a nasty, dirty, grungy place. You did not want to be here if you could help it. But this is the area you would come to bathe. This is also the area where you would come to do your business, meaning take a poo-poo or a pee-pee. And it's also where you would come to wash any utensils you may want to wash. But I wouldn't do that here. Well, the idea when they built Andersonville was this, that Andersonville will be put on this site because of this stream that you see that runs directly through the middle. This would be the source of water for the prisoners. They would use the stream itself to give the prisoners water. And as you can see now, we're coming into what would have been the inner wall where we're standing right now. This is the inner wall to my right, a little area between them, and then this would be the dead man's line here. And this is where you would have been, you and I would have been in 1864 if we're prisoners here inside Andersonville. And in order to bathe, wash ourselves, get some drinking water, this is the stream we would have to do that from. Now, the reason why we don't want to drink this water or have anything to do with this water is that the Confederate camps are going to run upstream of this stream that we're looking at, called the sink. So they're going to be up there, they're going to be taking their baths, doing their business in this body of water. Once it flows down to the camp, guess what? Right here, right where I'm standing right now in 1864 would have been where these men would be taking baths and unfortunately drinking the water. A lot of these men are going to die of disease here in Andersonville because of the very area where we're standing in right now. So if you come to Andersonville and you come to this spot, you're standing in probably one of the most, well, notorious spots of all the American Civil War, especially when it's concerning prison camps. If you ever watched the movie Andersonville, and if you haven't, go do that right now. I mean, by all means, it's a great movie. You will, well, see this spot in a lot of the footage in that film. And yeah, this is a cool place to be standing in. All right, so we've just talked about the water that we don't want to drink if we're here in 1864 as a prisoner. But what's going to happen in 1864 later on, in August of 1864, there's going to be a divine event take place here in Andersonville. And that's going to be when lightning is going to strike the area I'm standing in now. And it's going to spring up a spring. And the men here called this place Providence Spring, because they thought it was providence from God having mercy on them to give them some clean drinking water. And let's take a look at this spot now. So in August of 1864, there's going to be a lightning strike in this general vicinity. It's going to spring up this spring. Now, the Union soldiers in prison here are going to see this as a divine intervention, a sign from God that they're going to be okay, that He has them. So the veterans and men who were here called this place Providence Spring. And they're going to come here, the veterans are, after some years after they were here in the early 1900s, and they're going to erect this monument here commemorating Providence Spring. And if you walk in, you'll see something that's really kind of moving. With charity to all and malice toward none. And that's going to be a quote from Abraham Lincoln. And they're going to place that here. But isn't it kind of crazy? All of the things they went through here, they still choose to forgive. And JD from History Underground said it best, you know, when he said, that's a crazy thing to think about. After all the death, hardships that they put these men through, they chose to forgive, erected this monument here. And you can come here today and visit it still here at Providence Spring. Andersonville is going to be a 16-acre site in January of 1864. And in June of 64, it's going to be expanded 10 acres, making it roughly a 26-acre site. Now, you and I, we're getting off the train in Andersonville. And you can tell I'm out of breath because we just made that long march. Yeah. From Andersonville, Georgia, to this spot off of a train. And our main entrance to perhaps the last place we're going to be alive is right behind me. We just made our way in from this direction, and we're met with this. The intake gates of Andersonville Prison, or Camp Sumter. So once you pass through these gates, we are now about to pass through the second gate, which leads us into the prison. And as you get to this railing, which isn't here for decoration, I promise, this is now as far as we will ever be able to go back outside of those gates as prisoners here in Andersonville. Because if we come back across this line here, we're going to be shot and killed. Just me doing this would cost me my life. And there's some accounts of soldiers actually dying here. One guy accidentally tripped. His head landed too close to the wood, right over the line. They shot him. And several of the 13,000 soldiers that would perish here are going to meet their fate because of this deadline. But from this position, you really get the best sense of Andersonville on the entire site here. Because as you walk right outside of the gates here, and you got the view of the pigeon roost on the top, you get a view of the sink. You get a view of the stream that runs through the heart of Andersonville. And then you can see to the other side of the stockade walls. And then right on top of this hill, about where the trees are in the distance, is where the other walls are going to end. 33,000 men cramped into a 26-acre site, again making this place the 6th largest city of the Confederacy. Absolutely nuts. All right, so this is Andersonville, and of course we've got other stories associated with Andersonville, like the story of the raiders and regulators. The raiders would be Union soldiers inside of the fortification here that would pillage, steal, and take anything they could, anytime they could, from their fellow soldiers. Now, 80-something of those soldiers would be tried by a group called the Regulators, who are going to rise up against them, have the Confederates here at the stockade agree for them to be able to put them through a trial. And then 80-something of those men would be tried. A lot of those men would ended up going through a gauntlet of being clubbed and beaten. But 6 of those men of the Raiders would be hung here at Andersonville for their crimes, and they would be buried in Andersonville Cemetery. So if you look through Andersonville while you're here, you'll see a different number of fortifications, earthen fortifications, such as this. And this is going to be set in place for, of course, the defense of Andersonville by the Confederate Army. And you will also notice cannons also turned toward the camp itself. So if the prisoners had a riot, decided to rise against them, because there's only 3,000 Confederates here guarding 33,000 men at any given time. Well, they needed some way to defend themselves against unarmed men, so they turned cannons towards them. So this is another view of the prison camp here from the far back wall of Andersonville, or one of the side walls, and you could get a total glimpse of the entire site from this standpoint. And there would be 300 successful attempts to escape out of Andersonville by soldiers. But if you look on either side of the fort walls, you can really see the earthen fortifications lining the perimeter that would help stand guard here. So yeah, check out this spot if you come. This will give you a good vantage point of the entire camp. So this is the plaque talking about the sinks, the downstream end of the stockade branch that was here in this area, and it was otherwise a latrine. So this is where you would go to use the bathroom, and then unfortunately, well, people would come and drink that water and die of dysentery. But there were only a certain number of photographs taken by Confederate photographer A.J. Riddle during the war. There were only 6 or 7 photographs taken of Andersonville when he come to the camp here in 1864, in August of 1864. And this is one of the photographs that he took of Andersonville, and we'll blow that image up on the episode for you now so you can get a better look at it. But this is one of the few photographs actually taken here at Andersonville by Riddle, and this is exactly in this location roughly of where he took that photograph, and you can see Andersonville in the background now as opposed to then. Alright, so we have moved for the final portion of this episode to the National Cemetery here in Andersonville. There's going to be a guy by the name of Atwater who's going to come here in 1864, 1865, and he was a prisoner himself in Andersonville. Well, when the soldiers would die in Andersonville, they would be marked here with wooden stakes that would have a number on them. Atwater is going to take record of all of this, and in 1864 and 65 he's going to come back here to this spot with Clara Barton, the founder of the American Red Cross, and him or her are going to come to each individual burial pit grave using his records and number and identify most of all of these graves. There's only about 300 unknown soldiers in this cemetery, and that is because Atwater and Clara Barton are going to come out here and identify each and almost every one. So it is a very rare thing to have this, especially in the POW camp, but because of Atwater, the ex-prisoner who kept the records, him and Clara Barton were able to do so. Now I want to show you something here. Let's turn around and take a look at the tombstones. So if you notice, all the headstones here are really close together. That is because these are not graves with coffins, they are burial pits, men buried without coffins. These were dug during the Civil War. Wooden stakes were here in this place, or wooden markers rather, and then each man will be laying shoulder to shoulder inside of a long trench and just thrown in. And the very sad thing about it is when they're buried, they're going to be stripped almost naked, because the clothes of the men inside of the prison here were rotting off. They couldn't get clothes, they couldn't get anything. They were lucky to have a pair of pants. When someone died at the rate of 100 people that were dying a day, well, they would take their clothes off of them and reuse them. So most of these men are going to be buried without clothes. They didn't need them anymore. They were dead. The men still living in the prison did. So they would reuse those for their self. So yeah, pretty sad place when you pause and think about it. Now also in this cemetery are where the raiders are going to be buried after they're going to be hung and executed here at Andersonville, like we had just mentioned. And there are going to be 6 graves here of those 6 men who were hung, but they're going to be away from everyone else. They didn't give them the honor to be buried with the rest of their soldiers and comrades in arms. And we're not going to go see their graves today, not out of disrespect, just because I don't have the time. And honestly, well, the Andersonville heat has gotten to me, and I'm not going all the way back there to hunt them down. But they are here. You can come see them for yourself. We'll put up a photo here, and these are the 6 raiders that are hung here in Andersonville. Again, they're buried away from everybody else because, well, they wanted to not honor them and give them the honor of a proper burial. We've been paroled, and we are going to get out of here, and we're going to head to the next location. I know I've been promising you guys Wilson's Creek. That is going to be coming up next on the channel. So from Wilson's Creek, Missouri, we will see you then. But from here at Andersonville, Georgia, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Check out Project Pasture on YouTube. Also, Emerging Civil War and the American Battlefield Trust. We'll see you on the next one. Till then, keep preserving history. Stay safe.